Welcome everybody to Ironside Take30 event. We are going to be talking about implementing enterprise-safe generative AI, which is certainly a popular topic these days, and specifically talking about retrieval augmented generation, RAG or RAG. It's a framework that's emerged, and Lucinda will be talking about it in more detail. Let's go to the next slide. Just to introduce who's going to be speaking today, myself, I'm Brian Platt. I'm the director of our data science practice here at Ironside, and Lucinda Lindy is a senior data scientist here, very active in the generative AI community and very knowledgeable about the technology. So we're looking forward to speaking with you. Let's go to the next slide. So just for reference, Take30s are regular events that webinar events that Ironside hosts. There's an upcoming one on next February 1st on embedded analytics with QuickSight. And there may be some topics I confess I don't know, but I believe there's going to be topics about QuickSight Q, which is a generative BI for those that are interested. And then there's also previously we hosted a generative AI session, also presented by Lucinda, that gives some background on what generative AI is, how it can be used. And so if you have more, additional interest in this is kind of the second in the generative AI series. And so we encourage you to take a look at those previous events and get some background and attend the next one as well. Next slide. Just to give some context for those of you that don't know Ironside, we are a data analytics consultancy with over 20 years of experience. We can help clients in all forms of data analytics, starting with strategy, developing a framework for an implementation of data engineering solutions to hold your data, manage your data, govern your data. We have a data science capability and teamwork on that. That's obviously what we're focused on today. We also have a business intelligence group, which can work with the analytics and reporting to kind of get the information, the insights to the right people at the right time. And then managed services to handle all of those. If you don't want to do it in-house with your own organization, we can help you out and manage those services. So that's just a little background on Ironside, but you're here to hear about generative AI. So I'm going to turn it over to Lucinda now and talk about generative AI.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, Debbie. So for today's agenda, we're going to assume that people know what generative AI is. I'll give a brief little primer on that in a second here. But we're going to look at the impact of generative AI across industries, because now that's becoming very plain as to how large this impact is going to be. We're going to talk about the framework called retrieval augmented generation, which is a way of handling your own corporate documents and leveraging the power of large language models to give you a competitive advantage. And then we'll talk about next steps. So just as a little primer in case generative AI is not something that you're very familiar with, it's a type of software that's been trained, as in kind of machine learning training, across like a very vast data set. So in the case of text and large language models, it's been trained on the internet, Wikipedia, tons of code, etc. And it almost develops a semantic understanding of the language. And as a result, it can generate new text, new content that hasn't before. So if you said to generative AI, hey, give me the best practices, synthesize the best practices for onboarding of a technical employee, it would probably come out with a pretty reasonable first draft or an outline to get you started. So generative AI, over the course of 2023, has grown from being a curiosity in January, like, hey, you got to try out this ChatGPT, to a game changer by the end of the year. By the end of the year, Harvard Business Review was writing about how generative AI is changing creative work, how AI is becoming transformative, according to the Wall Street Journal. And even the FTC is looking at generative AI as something that could raise competitive concerns. Also, if you look at the graph on the left, we're going from very little to about 20 billion invested in generative AI in 2023, and projecting that to be double by 2024. So what is the impact? Now we're just going to look at, if you kind of look at the world of, you've got your AI, you've got your deep learning, you've got your generative AI, and then within that are the text-based generative AI, which are called large language models. And Accenture did a study where they looked at 200 different tasks that are done by various workers within banking, insurance, software, et cetera, and how much those tasks take for time by industry. They then looked at what would be the impact of utilizing large language models to automate part or all of the process, or to augment it in that kind of co-pilot mode where you get a head start on your work just by leveraging the large language model. And for across all these different industries, and there are many more because I truncated this graph so you could actually read it. 40% of working hours across industries are going to be impacted on average by large language models. And it could be significantly more. I mean, banking could be like 66%, where you either automate it or you augment it. And so those are the purple and the green parts here. The other ones, the pink is low impact, and NA is for the light purple. So it's definitely having a large impact. So one of the questions is, if you are going to, if you wanted to figure out a way how to get competitive advantage, what would be a way to take the company data that you have, which would include your best practices, your domain expertise, your processes that have been built on hard-won experience, and pair that with the power of an LLM to give you a source of competitive advantage? So the thing that has been emerging recently is something called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And I'll take you through each one of those words and the process later on in the presentation. But it's a powerful framework. You can utilize your company data. It's a way of not exposing your company data as you would with a public large language model, that where some of your inputs can go back to the creator of the large language model. And it's really a great way to bring many use cases to life that were previously not possible. So an example of use cases for a large language model might include customer support, where you may have documentation of best answers for certain questions that can be nicely summarized by a large language model and automated through that process. And then that'll give more time to people, to human agents, to be able to handle processes. Recruiting and hiring, finding the most qualified applicants. And we'll dive into this as an example. Marketing and automation, creating first draft responses for a proposal request, for example, or social media taglines or blog posts, etc. And software coding has turned out to be an incredibly rich area to apply large language models. You can draft unit tests, debug code, refactor code, etc. So let's talk about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So if you wanted to envision the process of RAG applied to recruiting, you're kind of like the world before and the world after. The world before is you put a job posting out there and you get 700 resumes for you to review manually. And just like, where do you begin with this? And then what you'd like to have is to be able to have a conversation with your documents and say, hey, knowledge base, given this job description and our hiring and who's tend to do well in our company, go through all these resumes and give me the top 10 candidates, please. And that's really the vision of using RAG for a process. So how does it work at a high level? Well, you can think about it as you've got your original language over here on the left, your original foundation model. Those are the ones that are the basic models that are created by the Googles, Facebook, OpenAI, tens of millions of dollars to train a model. You can bring a copy of that into your own cloud environment. So you've got like all the protections of AWS or Data Robot or Custom GPT to keep you, keep your data safe. You bring the model in. The green arrow over here with the X, your data does not go back to the maker of the foundation model. And then you can upload your hiring documents over here on the right-hand side and to create your knowledge base. Your hiring documents, your customer support documents, your marketing materials. These are all then formatted in embedded in a format that the large language model can speak with. You can then take your inputs in and ask the knowledge base the question, and then the large language model can formulate a natural language response. So one of the key things here is now you've got data isolation because it's kept in your own cloud for your own account. You've got access, fine-grained access controls for users and applications, and all the things that come along with a cloud environment and security. So let's take a look at retrieval augmented generation step by step. So first thing, as I mentioned, is you need to take your documents and embed them, and it's called embedding. You put it into a vector store. This could be a vector database or an index, and you have your pre-processed documents. You're just uploading all of your knowledge base. It could be your legal contracts. It could be your all of your hiring documents and resumes, etc. And they are stored in the vector database. And it's a different type of database than a relational one. It's got different functionalities. Then step 2 is you want to ask a question to the database. Well, you also have to take your query, your question, and embed it so that it can be in a similar format. And then you do a similarity search to say, like, hey, within this vector database, which are the chunks of text that actually relate the most to the query that's being asked. Then, so that's the retrieval part. You pull those relevant pieces of text. You pair it up with the query, and that's your augmentation, because now you've got your query that's been embedded, the text. You then feed it to all that augmented query to the large language model, and the large language model takes all the text and the embeddings from the query, and they puts it together, and it sends a response back to the user in the form of a natural language response. So this is incorporated like the thing that you wanted to know, and as well as the materials in your vector database that are relevant to answering that question. So let's talk about what's a good roadmap for getting to your first generative AI application. So I think it's important to think strategic first, like where can things have an impact? Start small and low risk applications, maybe an internally facing project, and then iterate and learn. One of the things about generative AI is that it's a very different sort of application or a capability than what we've seen in the past. It's different than how databases can give you information. And just learning how, I don't know, for people who, like the first time you use ChatGPT, you're there, you're trying to figure out the prompts, you give it a generic prompt, you get a generic answer. And then you figure out, okay, I got to be more precise in the way that I'm thinking about what I'm asking the large language model. But then, it's similar to when you're actually programming and making these applications. You need to try things out first. And at first, like anything you do for the first time, it's not going to give you back the answers that you necessarily want initially. But it does take some iterations and some practice on small use cases and then growing to larger ones, as they call the flywheel. So, and you can invest in generative AI in controlled steps. And so one way to think about, how to do this is a few things. Just do things step by step, have various, kind of decision gates where you can decide like, okay, yes, this is a good answer, I'm going to go on to the next step, or no, I didn't get a good answer, I'm going to go back and do some more work. But we're really going to focus today just on the first 2 steps here, which is use case discovery, in which case you're looking at, well, what are some of the best use cases that could have an impact on our business? What are pain points that take up a lot of time, that cost a lot, or pain points that our customers really want us to solve? And if we did, then that would be a whole new group of revenue that we could go after. So that's the use case discovery. And then once you get your list of prioritized use cases, you can take a few of them and just do a feasibility or a proof of concept on those. Try them out. See, do you have the data in your system right now to be able to essentially fuel the use case? And so that's important. Then once you've done some proof of concepts to see which ones are the ones you want to do, you might build out the generative AI application core, as well as the overall application, implement it, and then it comes down to performance and monitoring to proactively tune and readjust the presentation, the application as it's being used and as data sometimes shifts over time. So on use case discovery, it's helpful to have a framework to think about how to categorize your use cases. So on the x-axis there is what we call business viability. And so business viability includes, where in the process is this? Is it easy to include in your process, or do you have to actually remake your process? Is this defensible or not to your business? What are the relative costs of doing this in comparison to what you think the impact is going to be? Is there organizational sponsorship, and have there been resources set aside to actually implement, to go take the use case through and implement it? Some sort of estimated impact in terms of, well, what's it going to give us? Will it make our customer support people 40% more effective? Will it raise our NPI? Or will it decrease costs? And then finally, like high risk or low risk. And I do think that, especially when starting with this, going with low risk types of projects is a good way to do it, because learning is really essential to getting you on the first step. The y-axis is the Gen AI suitability. So, for example, large language models are really good at language-based things like resumes, legal contracts, customer support documentation, etc. They are not good at calculus, and nor really calculating things unless they've kind of memorized it. So that plays into the suitability for generative AI. Does it play to the strengths of large language models, like summarization, creating checklists, fixing your code, or image or text generation? Do you have the relevant feedback? Do you have the relevant data in your system? Can you ingest it? For the quantity and quality that you want? Can this live in an enterprise cloud for internal data, so that it's your LLM is in a data secure environment? What technical feasibility, like which large language model is best for this use case? So it may not be that you use OpenAI GPT-4 for all of your use cases, for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's expensive, and GPT-3 can be, I think, it's something like 10 times or 50 times less expensive. There are also literally thousands of large language models out there. Many of them are just tweaked versions of the big ones from Facebook, Llama 2, Google, or OpenAI. But there also are a lot of small models as well that can be highly focused on a particular use case. So the technical feasibility is important to look at and see, like, okay, which of these models are best suited for this use case? You can compare approaches with using a tool or going to a platform, etc. And then finally, error tolerance and mitigation. Are the costs of the errors small and or easy to mitigate? And the reason why is because another nature of generative AI is it does not give you a deterministic answer. It gives you a probabilistic answer. And so what that means is that sometimes there can be some variability in the answer. And as a result, processes that are dependent on extremely predictable and repeatable answers are probably less suited as an initial case for generative AI than ones where if it gets you in the ballpark faster, then it's a lot better. So what we do then is we just map our various use cases along the business viability and generative AI suitability, and pick out the ones at the top right where there's going to be good business impact and as well as good data suitability. You may choose a lesser viability one to get started. That could be a totally good, well, a reasonable strategic way to look at it as well. So in terms of, well, what are the conclusions for this today? Really, I think it's pretty, universally recognized that generative AI is transforming entire industries today. I mean, part of the writer's strike had to do with AI. That's how important this is for certain industries and certain knowledge workers. Important to pay attention to this technology. Knowledge work can be actually made much more efficient with generative AI, even looking at it on a task basis. There was an MIT paper that talked about how much faster and actually how much better quality work people can do when using a generative AI, a large language model like ChatGPT. And again, the common use cases that are emerging are in sales, marketing, and computer coding. Generative AI and LLMs are changing the landscape for entire industries, as we just mentioned, and companies not adopting generative AI will soon be at a significant disadvantage to companies that do. So I do feel like now is the time to start learning, start doing some internal facing projects or customer facing ones that you feel would be well suited to generative AI in the state that it's in right now. Responsible experimentation is recommended. And again, we talked about the framework that we have for business, for figuring out, discovering use cases and prioritizing them. That utilizing this RAG framework that we just talked about is a good way to safely leverage your company documents and pair it with the power of LLMs so you can get a competitive advantage from what you know about the industry, from your business. And that it may be necessary to do some modernizing of some of the data stacks in your cloud so that you can use it. So for example, if you've got like 20 years of customer support, then probably the stuff from 20 years ago may not be as relevant as the stuff today. So there may need to be some kind of culling of the data in order to get it to the point where the large language model can use it very effectively. And Ironside can help work with clients to really explore what are the different options for going forward and to help realize value from generative AI in safe ways. So thanks very much for listening, and let's go to some questions. All right, do you have any, Brian?
Sure, we've got some questions coming in, and I encourage anybody that has questions to ask in the Q&A. So please put those in your Zoom client. We do have a question asking, can you discuss strategies for reducing hallucinations?
Yep. So some of that is with the prompts. I mean, there's some settings that you can do. One is, there's settings on large language models would be to say they have something called temperature, and if you take temperature down to 0, it tends to reduce the creativity and probabilisticness of the response. If you do it to 1, then it can really just like give very wide-ranging responses. So that's one thing. Another one is that really, in any of the processes at each step, it is important to do hallucination reduction as, at each step so that they don't kind of keep propping up and compounding. Another one is just the way that your prompt is. You can ask it to cite sources and not make things up, and to leverage best practices, or you are an expert. So there's a lot going around the prompting there, as well as if you can also, I do feel that using the RAG framework itself reduces the amount of hallucinations, because now you're asking it to give you an answer based on the contents of your knowledge base. And so that makes it much more limited. And you can also ask it to If it doesn't know, just tell you that it doesn't know. Hope that's addresses the question.
Yeah, I was going to add. You mentioned that the RAD framework itself helps reduce hallucinations, and there's in terms of the doing it every step. I would also say that considering how your documents go in, we're certainly finding that how the documents themselves are sort of formatted and structured, and how the chunking and embedding. So breaking it up into the kind of the right size pieces, and what the right size piece might be different, whether you're talking about a customer support thing or whether you're asking it to like generate a new RFP, in which case you probably want a longer chunk, whereas a customer support, you probably want to keep the question responses smaller. So in that case, you'd want to keep the chunk size smaller. So the RAG framework does give you some ability to turn some dials and manage hallucinations just through the nature of the documents it's referencing.
Great, thanks.
Follow-up question kind of on the documents. Is it possible to get is it possible to know what documents the LLM answer was built from? The question, I'd like to get answers quickly, but know where they came from for the reference for the user.
Right. So that is another thing. With certain tools, you can that they already have built in that it will cite the source about which document that it came from. So this is really helpful. For example, if you're matching resumes or you're trying to figure out which resumes are the most qualified, you definitely want to know, well, give me the 10 resumes then. And then other ways are to actually incorporate that as part of the prompt, whether it's written either in the application and the instructions, or whether you're asking the question asker to do that. But yeah, say cite your sources, tell me which document it is. So yeah, that's possible, and I think is really part of a very important part of RAG as well in terms of the output.
Okay, I know we're running up on time here, so I did want to point out to the audience that in the chat there's a link to the resources, including the two previous webinars that were mentioned in the Take30 series. And if you do have any other questions, please contact us on the email you see there. We'd be happy to have a conversation, help you out, get you started with generative AI, or address the questions about RAG framework in particular. So we'd be happy to do that. I want to thank you all for coming. Please check out this and other Take30s, which will be posted on our site and on our various social medias to access those. The link is ironsidegroup.com/resources. So if you go to our website or to our LinkedIn, I'm sure we have the links there, but ironsidegroup.com/resources will get you to the previous Take30s. All right, and we're at time here, so I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for the questions, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation about this. So please get in touch.